Botswana, from cattle country to copper dreams. Yo, history buffs and radical thinkers. Ever heard of Botswana? Botswana is often hailed as an African miracle, a stable democracy with diamond-fueled growth. But beneath the shimmering surface lies a story of colonial exploitation, class struggle, and the power of the people. Who really controlled Botswana's resources? How did colonialism reshape its class dynamics? And what role did ordinary people play in its liberation? This is the untold story of Botswana, and we're diving deep into Botswana's past, uncovering the real forces that shaped this nation. Buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride. So, picture this, the late 19th century. European powers are carving up Africa like a giant bloody cake. And right in the middle of it all is a land the locals called Bechuanaland, the land of the Tswana people. Now, the British weren't exactly drooling over gold mines here, at least not initially. Their main concern? Keeping a buffer zone between the nasty Boers to the south and the Germans to the west. Think of Botswana as the awkward middle child in a neighborhood brawl. But don't think for a second that the British presence was benign. Even without immediate resource plunder, colonialism is fundamentally about control. Control of land, control of labor, and ultimately, control of the means of production. The British established the Bechuanaland Protectorate in 1885. Protectorate, huh? More like a leash. They didn't directly rule like in a full-blown colony, but they held the strings. They dictated foreign policy, controlled key administrative functions, and subtly began to reshape the economic landscape. Now let's talk class. Pre-colonial Tswana society wasn't some utopian classless paradise. There were chiefs, commoners, and varying degrees of wealth, often tied to cattle ownership. The Tswana kingdoms, like the Nwaketse and Kwena, were hierarchical. Cattle, the primary means of production, were concentrated in the hands of chiefs, Dikgozi, and elites, while the San and Khoisan peoples faced subjugation as landless laborers. But colonialism didn't just exploit these divisions, it weaponized them and introduced new ones. The British, in their own self-interest, often allied with certain chiefs, bolstering their power and creating a local elite that was more amenable to colonial interests. This created a new layer of class stratification, with some Africans benefiting from the colonial system, while the majority faced increasing exploitation. And what about the engine of this colonial machine? Labor. While Botswana wasn't a major hub for mineral extraction in its early colonial phase, compared to its neighbors, its people became a crucial source of cheap labor for the booming mines in South Africa. Men were forced to migrate south, leaving their families and communities behind, to toil in dangerous conditions for meager wages. This wasn't just about individual choices. It was a systemic exploitation where the wealth generated by Tswana labor flowed south, enriching the capitalist class in South Africa and indirectly the British Empire. Think of it as Botswana bleeding its most valuable resource, its people, to fuel the growth of a foreign power. But resistance simmered. The 1948 marriage crisis of Seretse Khama, a Marxist-educated chief, to a white woman exposed Britain's fear of anti-colonial solidarity. Khama's exile sparked protests, revealing cracks in imperial control. But history, my friends, isn't just about the powerful few. The struggle against colonialism wasn't some top-down affair led solely by chiefs and intellectuals. Ordinary Botswana, the farmers, the cattle herders, the migrant laborers, played a vital role in resisting colonial domination. This resistance took many forms, often subtle but always significant. Think about it. Refusing to adopt colonial agricultural practices that disrupted their traditional way of life was an act of resistance. Demanding better wages in the South African mines, even through informal strikes and protests, was a form of class struggle against exploitation. Maintaining cultural traditions and languages in the face of colonial pressure was a way of asserting their identity, and refusing to be assimilated. These weren't always headline-grabbing rebellions, but they were the everyday acts of defiance that chipped away at the foundations of colonial power. As the 20th century rolled on, the winds of change began to blow across Africa. Inspired by independence movements elsewhere and fueled by the continued exploitation and inequality, the struggle for self-determination in Botswana intensified. Educated elites, many of whom had witnessed the stark realities of racial discrimination and economic disparity firsthand, began to organize politically. But their efforts were amplified by the collective grievances and the quiet resilience of ordinary Botswana, who had never truly accepted colonial rule. The formation of political parties like the Bechuanaland People's Party, BPP, influenced by South African Marxists, demanded land redistribution and worker control, and the British-backed Botswana Democratic Party, BDP, led by Khama, opted for a moderate path. Keeping capitalist structures intact in the early 1960s marked a crucial turning point. These movements, while often led by intellectuals and chiefs, drew their strength from the widespread desire for liberation among the working class and the rural population. Their rallies weren't just about speeches, they were a manifestation of the collective will of a people who had endured decades of indirect but nonetheless real colonial control. Finally, in 1966, after years of political maneuvering and the growing pressure of the Pan-African independence wave, Botswana achieved its independence. But let's be clear, this wasn't just a gift from the departing British. It was the culmination of decades of struggle, the quiet resistance of ordinary people, the sacrifices of migrant laborers, and the organized political action of a burgeoning nationalist movement. Now, did independence magically erase all the scars of colonialism and class inequality? Not exactly. The economic structures established during the colonial era continued to shape post-independence Botswana. The reliance on mineral extraction, particularly diamonds, while bringing wealth, also created new forms of economic dependency and potential for inequality. The class divisions that were exacerbated under colonial rule didn't vanish overnight. So the story of Botswana's journey from Bechuanaland to an independent nation is a powerful reminder that history is a product of struggle. It's not just about treaties and powerful figures. It's about the everyday acts of resistance, the collective demands for justice, and the ongoing fight for a more equitable society. Even in a protectorate with less direct colonial exploitation, the underlying dynamics of control, labor, and class played a crucial role. Next time you hear about Botswana, remember this story. Remember the quiet resilience of its people, the enduring impact of colonialism, and the ongoing struggle for a truly just and equitable future. What are your thoughts? Drop your comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who wants to dig deeper into the real stories behind the headlines. Until next time, stay critical and keep questioning.